The whole other.
Welcome in, Heart Talkers, to another episode of Heart Talk. This is a podcast where we have everyday conversations with everyday people about both the hard and hope filled seasons of life. So, we're just starting off season two. So, if you're new to the podcast, I would be so appreciative if you would rate and review. Send me, a message of how you're liking it, and go back to season one. I've got 30 episodes waiting there for you. I am excited today. Today is September 10th, the day of recording this. It is World Suicide Prevention Day. And those of you that know me know I'm a mental health advocate, in addition to being a mom and an author and a speaker. And who I have today on the podcast is someone whom I have known for a few years, and we've connected in the mental health space. I am a big fan of him. He is a mental health advocate, a suicide survivor, attempt survivor, and an author, podcaster. Oh my gosh, I could go on. Todd Rennebaum, welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm honored you asked me to be on the podcast.
Hey, listen, I am a big fan of your podcast, and just know that you have been part of those inspiring people that really nudged me to dive in and start my own. Because it's not for the faint of heart, this podcasting thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a lot of work, and there's been a lot of swear words on my end trying to figure it all out, but and I just recently moved, so I had to reset up the studio and everything again, and so there was after about 3 years of figuring it out, there was more swear words again.
Yeah.
So
Hey, I'm
I'm
with
good
you.
now.
If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see that Todd's got this really great branding of bunny hugs and mental health, and he's got this like bunny suit in the background. It's so great. I always love you. You've got this like quirky, weird sense of humor.
You noticed.
And it's awesome. It's refreshing. So we're gonna dive into a lot of things mental health related. Invite you to share a little bit about your lived experience, really talk about that, I think, perspective of the discussion of men and mental health. And then we're also going to dive in and talk about, your podcast. I'm a big fan of it. I have listened to many, many episodes. Keeps me company when I'm on a drive. So we're gonna get into all of it. So let's
Plays are
start.
up and off.
Am I back?
Yeah, like you're talking in and mute for seconds. I don't know what you're talking about because it comes in halfway through something and then drops off again.
Yeah, I think we're good now. Hey, I hear you.
I hear you too, but
Okay.
I don't know if I will in a few seconds.
Hey, we're just gonna roll with it. So let's start with, if you can just share with everyone, like, who's Todd Rennebaum?
I'm a small town fella. I grew up in Indian Head, Saskatchewan. And yeah, I'm one of my 40. I had to ask my wife the other day how old I am. 47, I think, because I don't really care. So I'm kind of I grew up in a time where mental health, addictions, anxiety, stuff like this wasn't really talked about, or if it was talked about, it was like not talked about how it is today. Like it was yeah, it was more like, well, let's put it this way. I was diagnosed with a stomach ulcer in grade 6. I wasn't diagnosed with having anxiety, which caused the stomach ulcer. So that's kind of what I was dealing with growing up. Um, yeah, so it was tough because I was basically undiagnosed,
Right.
untreated with my anxiety and depression because of the depression in high school. Or sorry, the anxiety turned into depression, turned into addictions. So, and my dad was a social worker. So even social workers, and like it just was not studied, I guess, as much as it is now. Um, so yeah, so I grew up in a small town, depressed, full of anxiety and drinking.
Mm. Yeah, which tends to be more of a common story than not.
Well, yeah, now that I'm older, it sounds like it. Like I didn't, because nobody really talked about it. We just thought people were either weird or shy
Yeah.
or whatever. And like being a male in a small town, especially, like I didn't play hockey. I wasn't a farmer, so I didn't feel like I quite fit in. Even with the friend group I did have, I still didn't quite feel fully like I fit in. Um, and that was due to, I think, having ADHD untreated and undiagnosed until like a year ago. So yeah, it's been 47, 46 years of figuring this out.
I've had that conversation with quite a few men about recognizing that they lived with undiagnosed ADHD. And because as a result, turned to a lot of negative coping mechanisms to try to regulate that ADHD brain.
Hmm.
So fascinating. It was just a year ago you figured that out. So how did you come to that?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I figured it out, but I had a feeling. And it was, I mean, it was tough to find an assessment because it's so weird trying to get an assessment. You talk to some people and they're like, "Oh, I just talked to my doctor," and other people like me. It took me like a year to get an assessment, but I think it's becoming common enough that it's getting easier to find an assessment. But uh, I kind of was questioning it for a while, but it was actually at a family reunion event thing that a bunch of my cousins were talking about their ADHD meds and all this stuff, and I was like, "You guys have ADHD?" And they kind of looked at me like, "Well, you do too." I was like, "I do." Yes. So I was like, "Oh." And I didn't think much of it because I was like, "Well, whatever. I might have ADHD. What, I don't know."
Yeah.
And then it was like social media stuff, like Instagram and TikTok videos and stuff, kind of explaining it more. Because in my mind, when I think of an ADHD kid growing up, it was like the super hyperactive kid that
Yeah.
was like, you had too much chocolate and they went goofy. And it was like, I wasn't like that. You know, and then, yeah, it was the videos on TikTok and stuff that kind of explained it more. It's like, it's not always that. And so I was like, oh, I relate to all these videos. So yeah, I looked into an assessment, and lo and behold, a lot of my anxiety, a lot of my depression, a lot of my addiction issues, um, were actually symptoms of something bigger.
Yeah.
And was and so I was trying to treat symptoms as opposed to the main thing. So yeah. Yeah, and like I've been proactive in my mental health for mm, probably 10 years or more, probably more, taking meds and seeing counselors and everything. But this ADHD assessment really connected all the dots.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, now I'm like, well, that's why that treatment didn't work, or that's why that medication didn't work. So yeah, it's been life changing.
Yeah, I think it's a powerful awareness for many people when they come to that recognition that, oh my gosh, like there is more of a root here, and I'm not just dot, dot, dot. And I think that that happens with a lot of men and also women too. In my family, we have several family members, myself included. I mean, I check all the boxes, I don't have a formal
Yeah,
diagnosis of being ADHD. We're just working on, getting the assessment for our 9-year-old son. And you're exactly
mm,
right. It doesn't present in a textbook way all the time, So my son, he's very fidgety. It's hard to hold, focus on one thing because he's tuning into everything at once, but he's very good at school. He's not a behavioral problem.
exactly.
And so I think sometimes we get like that tunnel vision of, well, and the other thing that I notice, and I still notice, despite all the conversations we're having about mental health and destigmatizing diagnoses of different neurodiversity, is there's still a lot of stigma and shame attached to even an ADHD or ADD diagnosis.
Yes, I noticed that once. Well, I would tell people I'm waiting for an assessment, and then they'd be like, "Well, big deal, ADHD." Like that's some people would poo poo it. It was like, oh, it was almost like I got more empathy telling people I had depression, anxiety, and addiction issues
Mm.
than when I told diagnosed ADHD. Some people didn't believe it. Like, what? You? Nah. And I kind of, and I can't blame them because I kind of felt that way too. Because I didn't think I had it for the longest time. 'Cause I too was not educated or fully understood it. But
Yeah. And do
um,
you think,
so
I
yeah,
mean,
I'm kind of lately. I sorry, there's a bit of a lag there.
oh, go ahead.
I don't ever do anything.
Well, what I find, especially in education and in speaking with parents over the years as an educator, but also speaking with fellow parents, that I know, is because I think the association to like dysregulated behavior, almost as if there's an assumption that it can be controlled and that it's just, I don't know. I can't put my finger on exactly why there's still such a stigma or resistance for some parents to acknowledge that that might be the diagnosis, like their child might be neurodivergent. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just think,
I
gosh, we wouldn't do that if it was a physical. I mean, this is physical. This is brain. This is your brain. But anytime we
Yeah.
talk about anything relating to the brain as an organ, it's like we're just in a different lane. I don't get it.
Yeah, I know like a lot of parents they think, "Oh, just let kids be kids." And oh, yeah, that's I'm 100% for that. Or it's bad parenting that's causing the kid to do this or whatever. A lot of parents don't think kids should be on medication for something like this too, and that's up to you and your kid. But it's funny since being diagnosed, I've talked to a lot of people that were diagnosed as a kid and they didn't understand ADHD at all. Like it actually, it wasn't until like in their 30s and 40s they researched it more, and they're like, "Oh, this is what ADHD was." Like I was just told I had ADHD, and my parents never medicated me, so it was like it was. I mean, yeah, they were diagnosed, but they weren't treated. No one really understood it, and so I mean, it is. I know it sounds weird, but it is a big cause of my anxiety, my depression,
Hmm.
um, my addiction issues, and there's a lot of untreated people, and it's not what you classically think it is. Um, Sorry, I was going to make a point. I forgot.
That's okay. That's okay.
and I,
But
and I took my pill.
and there are so many nuances. And for some families and some kids and some individuals that I know, they choose not to go the medication route and they use other coping mechanisms or other things. I mean, I read a really great book by Gabor Mate called Scattered Minds and was
I bought
fascinated.
it,
Yeah,
and
good.
I didn't read it because I can't just sit and read something.
Well, I listened to the audiobook of his and I was, yeah. So I listened to the audiobook and oh my gosh, I had so many aha moments and fascinated to learn that Gabor himself was diagnosed, with ADD later on in life, and he didn't have the hyperactivity component to it, and so it did look different. And I think that, I
Mhm.
mean, I know so many mental health speakers, that are males that are just doing phenomenal in the mental health space because I mean, they talk about their recovery from addiction and how they spiraled, and then they'll always say, and I found out that I was, untreated in ADHD as a child. So there's so many kind of links that connect. So now that
Mhm.
has it
Mhm.
changed kind of the way you approach your mental health maintenance plan? Kind of how you take care of your mental health?
I don't. That's a good question. I don't know if it's changed or if it's just I've accepted things better. Like I mean, I'm not cured of anything, right? So I'm still
Right.
gonna have anxiety, still have depression, I still have cravings and all this stuff. Whereas before it was like, why am I like this? Why am I still doing this? Why am I like and now with the diagnosis, it's like, oh, I know why I'm doing this. Just it's how I'm made. It's how
Yeah.
my brain is. It's actually hardwired this way. It's not something I can cure or whatever. I can just deal with it. So a lot of the negative talk, a lot of the guilt, a lot of the shame has kind of subsided a bit. I mean, again, that too. Um, it's not perfect every day, but it's a lot easier to live now um,
Yeah.
without the negative talk and spiraling and I mean, we talk about some kids who are diagnosed and they have great lives. It also depends on like I think it depends on nature and nurture.
Mm.
And some kids grow up with parents that are ADHD and they're artists and they're this and they're that and they're kind of free flowing. So that's a really great space to grow up in as a kid with ADHD, right? It's not like these hard, fast rules that are like, like no offense to boomers, but like boomers, like you have to get a job, you have to get a pension, you
Yeah.
have to do this, and as someone with ADHD, I mean, I quit jobs every 2 years. Like I've had two or three businesses on my own, and it's like I can't, and then I beat myself up every time I quit a job, and so it's like full of guilt, full of shame. I'm a terrible father, terrible husband. I can't, I'm a terrible provider. And then, it spiraled me to drink and use. And so anyway, so some people really thrive and it's okay. They
Mm.
don't need medication. But yeah, I don't know where my point was in that, but
What I
but
love,
that
what
was,
I really love about these conversations, and I love about your full transparency, is that it gives us the, context of understanding of, when we can hear these kinds of lived experiences, we can have a full appreciation, or at least our eyes are opened to that, the cycle of shame and embarrassment. And I think that often, I mean, my son and I were talking about, I mean, we haven't formally sat him down and said, you have ADHD. But we were having a conversation one day, and he was talking about one of his classmates who everybody knows has ADHD. And I was just talking off the cuff and said, "Well, yeah, you do that. You do too." Um, I don't know how it came about, and he looked at me like shocked. Todd, he was like,
hmm,
"I don't have ADHD." And then we had this conversation about brain physiology and about the superpower of having a brain that's wired differently than everybody else, that gives you the creativity, gives you the spontaneity, the adventure, makes you more musically inclined, makes you an empath, a big feeler. So we had that conversation. It was interesting, but you know
hmm,
I said to my husband, it's like we're waiting for the doctor to say, when we know our son, we've known him for 9 years. We see it, and even the teacher was like,
yeah.
well, I don't know. He doesn't show that at school. But the one time he came home and he said, Mom, it's exhausting sometimes to be at school all day and to try to like focus and try to just like be a good student. And I hear that from a lot of, kids who are neurodivergent, right? It's like, you gotta sit in the row, listen all day. It's a torture, I think, for the ADHD kids.
It's a nightmare. And so yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure where this conversation was going to go, but apparently ADHD. But um, what ADHD is, so I've learned, it's like we can't make dopamine as easy as other people. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like we're constantly craving it, and certain things give us that dopamine. And like if we're bored in class, so it's not a lack of focus, it's more like hyper focus things we want to do, giving us the dopamine. So if the kid looks distracted because he's doodling in class instead of listening, it's like, well, actually he's hyper focused. He's not
Yeah.
he's not distracted. He's actually hyper focused, or she, and they're craving that dopamine. So
Yeah. And
because
my
that
son,
type of brain,
my son could be like, he's like, he could be a spy. You think he's not listening. He's heard everything. He's heard everything that's been said and can repeat it. But
mm,
yeah, I love that you brought that into the conversation about, what it is. It is hyper focus. It's not that you can't focus on one thing. It's that you're just tuning into all of the things at once and the dopamine seeking. Yeah. And I find that
mhm.
that happens a lot with my son as well, is the argumentative state, that happens in kids trying to spark an argument because you get a dopamine hit. And I learned that from Gabor's book. And I thought, geez, never even thought about that way. You always just look at them of just being like, insolent, non-obeying children.
Yeah. And, my life wasn't wrapped around allowed to be flaky, right? I mean, flaky sounds negative, but I mean, for me, it is kind of a superpower. Um, yeah, it did cause a lot of shame and guilt and depression because I don't have a good pension because I'm quitting jobs every 2 years, and so I'm CEO and I'm doing things that are inside my moral code because of the education and that dopamine hit, and to the point that yeah, I got really wrapped up in stuff to the point that I tried to take my life, and so yeah, luckily, you know, I'm here.
Mm.
Um, but that was a little over 10 years ago. I always say 10 years ago for everything. So it could have been 15. I don't know. But anyway, um, and that was kind of the beginning of my kind of journey of figuring stuff out. And it took 10 to 15 years to get where I am today. And I'm still figuring stuff out, right? It's um yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, you often hear in these stories, lived experiences, that there is a rock bottom, and some people come back from it and some people don't. And I'm a firm believer we're all born with this divine purpose. And I know that say, you've jumped around from job to job, and what you do now, sharing the experiences and the stories of people, I mean, it's life-saving for other people. And you and
Yeah.
I both know you don't get rich being a podcaster, but there's other ways in life we can get rich, right?
Well, and that's the thing. Everybody has a different idea what success is. If I could just not be miserable, then I had a pretty successful day.
Hey, I think that's
um,
a valid conversation about what the stereotype and belief about success is, especially from a male's perspective, or the, perspective of society on what a male should and shouldn't do, the providing, the um because that's a lot of pressure for you guys.
it is. I mean, of course, I mean, that's very generalized, right? I mean, a lot of, uh, it's kind of sounds sexist in a way, I guess, but it's true that, I mean, again, it's nature nurture. And I grew up in a very traditional um, household. So, yeah, my mom stayed at home and she had maybe part-time jobs and stuff. But my dad made all the money. And it's like, yeah, when
Mhm.
I went graduating and stuff, it was like, okay, I'm going to start a family. I got to provide. I've got a lot of responsibilities. And 20s, was I was a phenomenal worker. Like I have bosses that are so like you were the best, one of the best employees I ever had, but I burnt out about 30 mid 30s. It just like I hit this wall and I was
Mhm.
like, I haven't had a part-time job in about a year and a half even. So um that's a big pill to swallow for a middle-aged guy whose kids are in university and his wife works full time and I'm in my basement talking to people about being sad, making no money. It's like it's a big pill to swallow, but also I am very lucky that I have a wife and kids that are so incredibly supportive and just want us all to be happy. And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if I'm, bringing home the bacon, as it were. And yeah, I know lots of people that have amazing jobs, amazing supporters, amazing uh, supervisors, and they're also gone 2 weeks out of the month working, and they're miserable. So,
Yeah.
um,
And what I
yeah,
was when
everyone's got a different idea what success is. So,
Yeah, and what I see as, a friend and someone who's been following, your journey, is you have purpose, and that purpose is keeping you going.
I'm not gonna lie, I still, especially lately, having guilt and shame issues around not financially making much, but because like I see my wife come home tired and exhausted, and it's like, and then I'm eating chips at night that she bought for the family, stuff. It's
Yeah.
like I'm not worthy. I'm such a this and that, and um, I mean, I'm a lot better than I used to be, but like I said, I still have days where I'm big shit out of myself, and and then I have a
Yeah.
conversation in the basement here with someone on the podcast, and they're like pumping my tires and saying what wonderful things I'm doing, and it's like this is it's weird. It's a weird paradox.
Well, even this vulnerability of sitting here, and sharing with strangers that this is your journey of the circle of kind of shame and guilt, and then you're back on top and you're feeling motivated and you're feeling inspired and you're feeling appreciated, and then back down to, my gosh, I'm worthless, and I feel guilty. And I mean, I think that the power in sharing this is that someone listening feels the same, you know
Yeah,
and and it gives a full appreciation for those of us listening too, to think about, the struggle and the highs and the lows and the roller coaster ride of mental health, and navigating these
absolutely.
spaces. So let's segue to talking about the podcast. I told you
Hmm.
before we came on here. I have some of my favorite episodes of yours that they blew my mind. I was like, I remember I messaged you saying, "How do you find these people and get them on your podcast?" But tell me, like, who are your top five guests? Because how long you been doing this?
Um, over 3 years. I have so I did co-host about 25 episodes with someone else once a week, and then also once a week I did solo ones where I had guests. So I have close to 200 episodes in total, but it's around 170 episodes where it's just me, I guessed. So it's really, really narrow. Daniel Norwood. He was he was an alcoholic. He had to all
Can
types
you
of trauma.
can you start again, Todd? My internet's unstable, so I'm gonna have to just cut this. So can you say that name again?
His name is Daniel Norwood, and he had all types of trauma. He grew up poor, and he went to the military and had all types of traumas, and raging alcoholic and drug addict and stuff. And then his life turned around. He found a really amazing woman who set him straight, and they were, I mean, he was like, holy shit, this is what life is, and he was happy. And one night he was drunk, and in the States you're allowed to carry weapons and stuff, and he was drunk, tried to unload his pistol and accidentally shot his girlfriend in the leg, and she bled out and died in front of him and in front of their kids. And he actually reached out to me because I did an episode called Accidental Killers, where um, people, like in car accidents, accidentally kill someone, or at work accidents and stuff. So he reached out because he wanted to join this um, peer group that these people started. So anyway, we've become amazing friends, and now he's a motivational speaker, and he's amazing now. Like, when he reached out to me, like, he was like on the verge of like leaving Earth. And
Wow.
so yeah, his story it was like the most powerful story ever. And uh, I recommended him to a podcast called This Is Actually Happening, which is it's a huge, huge podcast. I mean, it's like probably a million listeners a week kind of thing. And I knew his story, like we were good friends, but listening to him tell the story on someone else's podcast, like I started bawling. Like his story was
Wow.
amazing. Um, a couple local people, there's Agata in Canada here. They were considering having made medical assistance in deaf for mental health reasons. And Agata, she has an extreme eating disorder, and she applied. But since then, the government's kind of put it on hold. But yeah, she was amazing. She's in Regina here, and she wants to die, and it's horrible and sad. Um, she was just a fascinating person to talk to. Talk to Vanessa Burns, her mate. He was it the James Smith Cree Nation? Is that what I
James
forget it
Smith
every time?
Cremation. Yep.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, her mate like went on this big murder spree. I can't remember how many people ended up dead. I think it was 12 people or something like that. And then he was on the run, and yeah, he ended up overdosing as the police are arresting him. Anyway, I spoke to her, and like some of her, like her father was murdered by this guy and stuff. So she was fascinating. I've also talked to like Zach Williams, who is Robin Williams' son, and we just we talked about his addiction issues. A lady named Scarlett Lewis, she lost her son in ah, school shooting, the elementary school shooting. Oh, Jesus.
Is it
Can't
Sandy
think of her
Hook?
name. Sandy Hook. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to that
Um,
episode.
yeah, it was a double episode. She was
Oh,
amazing.
that was a hard one to listen to,
Ugh.
Todd. Yeah, that was a hard one.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't want to make things fluffy, so I tried to really find gritty guests with gritty things to say and hard to
Hmm.
listen to things saying things that are hard to listen to, because I think that's why for a long time illness and mental health wasn't talked about because people
Yeah.
didn't. It was hard. It was uncomfortable. And it's like, well, we have to have these conversations. If it's uncomfortable, all the more reason to listen to it, I think. So,
Yeah, if it's
uh,
easy to look
um,
away,
but
like
yeah,
if it's too easy to look away, which often it is, then we're not facing, the stories behind the stories of yeah, I found that episode with Scarlett Lewis to be absolutely heartbreaking, but to hear her story of hope and resilience and
yeah,
climb back from that,
and
absolutely,
forgiveness.
and forgiveness. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That
she was amazing.
and then go
Sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
Uh, well, just yesterday, it might be out when this episode's out. I'm not sure when this comes out, but I spoke to a lady who, have you heard of Kenneth Law? So he's a Canadian guy who's like charged with 14 counts of first degree murder. He was selling this poison to people over the internet as like a suicide aid, some kind of chemical. I can't remember what it's called, but her son ended up buying some of it from him, and it's a really great episode too. She's very powerful, and yeah, and again, like kind of like Scarlett Lewis's. I I actually don't know if she forgive this guy, but she has very, to me, a good outlook on it. She's less like, okay, why are we charging this guy with 14 counts of murder? Instead of looking at that, we should look at why is there like 1,500 people buying this stuff from him? Like,
Yeah.
what, you know, instead of being, oh, geez, my brain this morning, reactional, like, what, like,
Yeah.
let's maybe be preventable. Like, let's figure out why so many people want to die as opposed to, um, punishing someone that's giving them the means to do it. The other thing is like we talked about was, you can go to Walmart in the States and buy bullets. And it's like, well, why
Yeah.
isn't Walmart being charged with murder? Because so many people are, most gun violence in the States, it's self-inflicted. So, well, anyway, not that I'm saying he shouldn't be charged or shouldn't, he's
Mhm.
doing very irresponsible stuff. But yeah, I think the
So many,
conversation should be more about
yeah,
that. Sorry.
that's what I find when I listen to your episodes. I mean, there's like every topic imaginable, and you just don't know the depth of human suffering until you hear the lived experience of some people who have been literally to hell and back and how they've survived it. Um, the other episode I thought was very interesting is when you interviewed um, a gentleman who had been an active school shooter and had
Yeah.
spent time in jail. And I was shocked to hear how long he spent in jail. And he hadn't actually injured anybody or taken their life. And it was a serious, right? Like he didn't kill anybody, but
Or there's a
he,
bit of leg there. I think a teacher did get shot in the leg when they were trying
okay.
to take the gun from him, but yeah, he got like 17 years
Yeah.
in jail. Um, he turned like in prison, he, turned his life around, and he was like, yeah, he's such an amazing guy. I know it sounds crazy to say that this cool shooter is an amazing guy, but he really is. And now he travels all over the states speaking about it and talking about it. And again, talking about what
Yeah.
drove me to that as opposed
Hmm.
to I'm a bad guy and all this stuff. And then he was a victim of violence himself, and now he has like his hands are all severed and stuff. He was attacked. He was working in a shelter, a homeless shelter in the States, kind of giving back. And yeah, he was attacked. So, and he forgave his abuser, and because he knows the mental health, mental illness, and the lack of services, and so he actually had empathy for his attacker. Not saying that he didn't think he should go to jail or anything.
Hmm.
You do have to uh, be responsible for what you did, um, but yeah, John Romano, I forget how
Hmm.
to say it, but yeah, and yeah, he was an amazing guest, and I always feel bad when people are like, "Oh, you're doing such wonderful things, Todd." It's like I just find fascinating people and hit record because it's almost for selfish reasons. It's like yeah, yeah.
Well, let's talk.
And I'm
Yeah.
learning from them, right?
And we are all led to that. Those of us who find ourselves in this space is there's some like reciprocity in the process in that we get to tune in to our own healing journey, and it
Exactly.
helps us just as much as it helps others. I mean, one of the one of the latest episodes I'd listened to, my gosh, was The Coffin Confessor. And I immediately downloaded his book and listened to it like in 6 hours. I reached out to him to see if he'd come on my podcast because I'm like, you know, I would have never thought to have somebody like this. What a fascinating, like
Yeah.
heartbreaking and out of
Yeah.
this world story.
Is he coming? Oh, you're gone.
Can you see me?
Oh, there, you're back. Is he going to be on your podcast?
Yes, he immediately
Nice.
accepted. My husband was like, "How do you find that guy?" I'm like, "Through Todd." I said, like, but anyway, I mean, I hope that the listeners here today tune in to your podcast. There are stories that will rip your heart out and put it back in again, give you hope for humanity, um, just appreciation and kindness and empathy for what, the human race goes through. So,
Yeah. And it's not all fantastical stories like these. Like some of them are just everyday people that are talking about their mental illness, some of, whether it's borderline personality disorder. I've talked to narcissists. I've talked to um, antisocial. Uh, yeah, those things. So. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and the common thread is everyone is suffering. Nobody likes being a narcissist. Like it's based on trauma too, and it's that this is how their brain or their DNA, whether it's nature or nurture, for whatever reason, this is how they're coping. And so, it's a personality disorder, so it can be treated. Some mental illnesses, it can be treated by medication only. Um, but the reality is everyone's just trying to get by. And,
yeah,
so yeah, everyone's hurting a little
yeah.
bit.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Everyone's hurting and just trying to get by, do the best they can with the tools they have. Well, listen, friend, this flew by this time. Great episode.
Oh, good.
I'm honored that you accepted to come on. And where can people find you?
Bunny Hugs. Well, the podcast is called Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. It's on wherever podcasts are. But my social media handles are Bunny Hugs Podcast. So yeah, Instagram is where I'm usually the most active. If you want to check that out.
All right. And I'm
Oh,
gonna,
one thing.
yes, let's see.
Sorry,
What-
my kids' book. Sometimes Daddy Cries.
Yes.
That's on Amazon.
Yeah. I will post the show note in the show notes, the links to all of those and the link to Todd's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. It's a really great children's book to start, you know, having those conversations with the wee ones early on. So thank you,
Yeah.
Todd, for joining me today. So much
Thanks,
appreciation
Laura.
for you.
Thank you, and same to you. I always appreciate talking to you and yeah, and having yeah. Thank you, Laura. You're a nice lady.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to tune into more of your episodes. So you take care, bud.
You too.
Okay, stop the